We always take special pride when an MPS alum joins us, and we are thrilled to have photographer Clay Patrick McBride as our speaker tonight. Clay earned his BFA and MPS from SVA and went on to teach at the school. He currently serves as faculty in the photography program at the Rochester Institute of Technology. His portraits of top athletes and musicians such as LeBron James, Allen Iverson, Metallica, Norah Jones, Z and Kanye West have appeared in magazines such as Rolling Stone, Sports Illustrated, and New York Magazine. His commercial work includes dozens of album covers for Sony, Blue Note, and Atlantic Records, as well as print campaigns for Pontiac, Boost Mobile, and Nike. Over the past few years, Clay has expanded into moving pictures with a number of short film projects and music videos. It is safe to say that there is never a boring day when Clay is on set. I admire the way he meets celebrities on his own terms and is able to craft his distinctive brand of images with wit, soul, and high-energy visuals. So please help me welcome Clay Patrick McBride.
Pictures, right? Talk about people that influenced me. This is my freaky brother. He's a magician. He lives in Las Vegas. He's like the Michael Jordan of magicians. He's the most probably influential magician of our generation, and he's a great teacher. And I grew up with a very altruistic person who was into giving to the community and to bringing people together, which I think, I try to live that in my, my students are here, it's powerful, right? So I try to live in that, and he's also a great practicer, right? Just the idea of practice, I think Katrine, has an awesome practice of Instagram, right? Like to see her on the Instagram, she's got a great practice of seeing that water, that bridge, that skyline, and always looks different, and just the idea of practice, right? So, and then my dad was a great influence, and so this is, I guess, my work from the 90s, and these were like these graffiti books we had in New York City where we put our Polaroids and our twisted dark emotions in and write your notes and contact sheets. And at the time I was at SVA and an undergraduate, and I was like slavishly impersonating Penn and Avedon and these guys, and just shoot with a view camera and trying to get the light diesel and trying to get the light banging, just trying to do these things, but really just impersonating people that. And I think there's a power to that. I think that's something I encourage young photographers to do. But I was really unhappy with the picture. And then I took this picture one day, and it was like double exposed, and I cut it in half, and I spit on it, and I stuck it to my shoe, and I scratched it. And this is the 90s, right? So like, this is just how shit looked like, Gen X, right? Like it was just everything. Grunge, right? I was probably listening to Tool. It was probably 2 a.m. I was a guy, who found photography, and it became my way through some difficult things. Like you could see, like, I'm trying to understand my father in some way in this picture, right? From where it was, to here, like we're having a hard time understanding each other, right? We have I was like a rebel without a clue, and then I got a camera, and it was like a compass, and I was like, I'm just gonna go, right? And I had a lot of coffee, and so then I start and then I find something that's authentic and real, and it feels like it's me, right? Like style is, you find some shit you like and you hit repeat, right? And that's style, right? So I had this style, and it was analog, and it was angsty, and it was helping me through some stuff, like photography was a great container for me to process some invisible things. It still is. And, this is the work, what it looks like. And I still get excited when I see this shit, to me, it was, I don't know, like Jung says, like to be, like vision is like making the darkness visible, or bringing light to the darkness, or luminaries are something about dark and light, or there's some Jungian shit in there. But I felt like I was on it, like I was making this unseen world of me, like visible in some sort of way, and it was making sense, and it was helping me, like, you could see that, work is not made by a person who's well with the world, right? Like, right? You get that, right? Like, it's just in it, right? And that was cool, you know? Like, I think we all have, you know, our edge to come against, and whether it's in art or other things, this is where it was happening for me. And we were really encouraged in art school to be authentic and to find a style. Like, that was the shit that SVA was like, you're gonna do that now, right? You're gonna find a style, and it's gonna be unique, and you're gonna be like a snowflake. They didn't say snowflake, but, you know, they want, snowflake, serendipity. All right, and so this work is this work, and then I have teachers, and I love teachers that aggravate me. I try to be that guy, you know? So I had this teacher who told me, you'll never get work doing this sort of thing, right? And that really bothered me. And this is a negative, right? Just to show you what I was doing. So this is 4x5 film, and it's negatives, and I'm painting, and this would be the print, right? Just so you could see the process, right? So these were like mosaic negatives. I was printing it in like an 8x10 glass negative carrier. Black and white negatives that I would print in color, and that's how they look. So for the nerdy techie guys, like, how'd you do that? That's how it was happening, by hand, right? But I did, like, I wanted to work. Like, I didn't want to hang out in galleries with people in turtlenecks, and I wanted to be a part of, like, I'm more popular culture kind of guy. Like, although I was making some stuff that someone might call fine art, I wanted to work for magazines. I wanted to work for, ideally, record companies. That, to me, was like my first experience with art. I'm probably 7 years old. It's 1970-something. I'm in my sister's bedroom. She's cleaning pot on a 12-inch record. I'm looking at like Led Zeppelin album artwork. You know, I'm kind of mesmerized by marijuana. Brown, it was brown at the time. There were a lot of seeds in it, very different than it is now. And they were cleaning it on these records, and there were these photographs, and it kind of became like, that to me was, they were mysterious pictures, these 12-inch records, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I started to work, I changed it. I met some, wow, I feel like I'm just like a jackhammer of freakiness. I should slow down a little bit. My wife would tell me to slow down a little bit, stop being weird. Just chill. All right, so yeah, I want to work for magazines, I want to work for record companies. And I met some of my favorite photographers, and they were like, yo, you gotta like, just take some of you out of this, put some other stuff in there, and I think this stuff will fly. I think people will respond to it. And they were right. Like, I started to get commissions. I started to change the work a little bit. And I started to do some things. You know, this was about Australia's identity crisis, you know? And I was looking for a lot of, I went and met my favorite photographers, and I thought I wanted to work for these guys. And they were all very nice to me and polite to me. But they're like, you know, you should just shoot. You don't want to assist me. And I got really upset because I was looking for a mentor when I was done with school, and I couldn't find one. And, but they all gave me some good advice on like what to do with my work that I try to listen to. And I started to, you know, make pieces inspired by my favorite paintings. And this is, you know, of course, Francis Bacon. And I love people screaming. But like, I was just out of art school. I made this picture of my friend Robert, and I was at Sony Records one day, and I just remember, to get your work in front of people is very different now. You know, we take it for granted that you can be published on Instagram and a website, and you have all these platforms to get your eyeballs on people. Like, I had to physically take this box of prints and be like, yo, check this out. Like you had to get it to the people, really, to get your work seen. There was the www thing the world was still round. It wasn't a flat world. You know what I mean? Like, it was a different planet. But so I'd get in front of people, and then this guy bought this picture for, I remember it was like $4,000 or something. And I was making $200 a day, maybe $150 as an assistant at that time. And it was like, whoa, a fortune to me. So I was so stoked. And I started to get these weird jobs, like for Maxim magazine. This was about when they did that gas stuff in Russia, when they had all these prisoners in this theater. And I had to make these pictures that were like quick reads, and whatever, there's a long, stupid story I don't want to get into, but it was exciting. This is about carpal tunnel syndrome, you know, just to work like this and to be free like this. This is about like these white trash kids down south who were, it was for like a gay magazine, so they were these homoerotic kids who were doing, I don't know, I was trying to just make this homoerotic Ku Klux Klan sort of icon thing. It was kind of cool to be given pictures that I'd never make a picture about and have to solve the problem there, you know? So this I did for, right? It's no more, the Village Voice, right? Yep. It's rest in peace, right? This for the Village Voice on Rockefeller Laws, you know? So I would take a picture and then I put, these are sweet and low lines that I would put sweet and low on top of it and rephotograph it, right? So, and it was about mandatory sentencing and people being put in bars. And, you know, I make pictures like this that I wanted to work for Blue Note because they had like a deep archive of great artwork, you know? So I think having a good target of who you want to work for, like a very clear target is, you know, is great, you know, to like have a direction. And so I make a picture like this, I think like that'd be a dope album cover, and send it to Blue Note, and they became like seeds, you know? And I'll tell you sort of a long story about this because it's like a kind of a huge moment in my life, you know? I did this cover for Time, right? But like what's weird about this is like they're not my photographs, right? Like I was not hanging out shooting Die and Doty with a 600 millimeter lens like in the weeds like a paparazzi. That was not me, right? And that's a car crash down there, that's not me, you know? So what happens is that these pictures have been seen a lot in magazines and they need to reinterpret them and reskin them so they look interesting again. So I'm becoming like this filter in Photoshop, like the Cleasy McBreezy filter, right? Like, and kind of reinventing these images and giving them that contemporary Gen X 90s flavor, right? Putting that Gen X sauce on them, right? And paid well, and of course it's like all across the world, Time magazine. It was a real honor to be a part of that. But they're not my pictures. So I met this guy, Matt Mahern, who's also a great photo illustrator, and he's like, yo, you gotta be real careful of this, don't mess with this, and don't let people do this. It can, you know, be a real curse to you, and he gave me some great advice. But, so I started to kind of slowly distance myself from this kind of work, but, you know, my dad, who I said I had this crazy relationship with, you know, like, I'm at his funeral, you know, and this Judge Williams comes up to me and he's like, you're Clay, right? I'm like, yeah, because usually they're like, are you the magician? And I'm like, no, I'm the photographer, right? You know, right? Because my brother, he's like, you know, he's mega, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm the photographer, Clay. He's like, yeah, funny. You know, your dad used to bring this magazine and he'd show it to me. It was a Time magazine. You did that, right? Yeah, I did that. He goes, you know, your dad must have showed it to me about 10 times, and I always acted like I never saw it before. Because he was just so proud of you, you know? And I get goosebumps, I get choked up when I tell that story, because like that's something photography gave me is like one, respect for myself, and like a lot of respect for my family, and you know, just gave me something that I've been looking for my whole life, you know, like for my old man. I mean, you know, I got mythic dad shit, right? You know, but in that moment, it was really powerful when this Judge Williams came up to me and said that. And then after the wake, I was going through my dad's drawers and I found the actual magazine. And you ever seen a magazine that sat by the toilet too long and it's kind of like, just, you know what I'm talking about. Well, it was like that magazine. So it was a real big moment in my life. And I started to shift. Like this was shot for Vibe on pirate radio. And I started to meet some art directors. And in the 90s, you know, music business in 96, like more records were sold that year than 10 years before that combined or something. It was a crazy time in music. So I was working for some great people in the music industry, and they taught me, you know, like they knew I was a young talent, and they were gonna take a risk and hire me, but somehow they knew that I was gonna deliver. And they taught me like, yo, you're gonna work hard, you're gonna give me a lot. Like this giant Leo guy, Larry Fremantle, he's like 6'4", he's like this giant guy. He was like a football coach and an art director at the same time. And he just worked me, you know, like 12, 15-hour day. I was gonna grind it out. I was gonna give my soul to this record label for X amount a day. And he just gave it to me. And then slowly it shifted. I started to get these great opportunities for little magazines, right? I waited a long time for Mr. Rakim to show up at my house, but he came through, and then it was like suddenly I had this legitimate brick, like you know, this sort of work. Like, you want to shoot famous people, it's like you got to get on the ground floor somewhere, right? With a small magazine that's going to get some good talent. Or I always tell people to become friends with the best band playing at the smallest venue, right? Like, and become the guy who, like, I cut that guy's hair, right? Like, I cut his hair like nobody cuts that dude's hair, right? And like, just become a member of that band, and then they bring you up with them, you know? Because once they get to the top, everybody wants to shoot Kanye West. Like, come on, right? But when you're at the bottom, when you're at the ground floor of that shit, like, there's a lot more room, and I don't know. I took this picture in, I think, '99 when there was a strike, and it's huge in this thing called sneaker culture, which is two words that I think are very funny when they come together. There's a sneaker culture, right? But like, I became a part of that somehow through this picture. And you know, this guy, he was considered heavily tattooed at the time, which I find funny. You can't, but he was heavily tattooed. He represented this new era of basketball, and this sort of, you know, he crossed over on Jordan, humiliated him, and I don't know, he just represented this whole new thing, and I didn't know it at the time. I went to Philly. I waited 13 hours for this dude to show up, you know? But like, that art director and me, after we were 13 hours in Philadelphia together, just being weird, playing video games, eating another cheesesteak, like we rented a hotel room for a while and just like laid on the bed and watched movies because we were so bored. Like, we were homies, me and this art director, and then he went on to give me all this work, right? Because we went been to battle together, and we came out successful with this iconic thing of, you know, whatever. It's like, yeah, the Iverson pictures. I don't know. Yeah, it's big. People could talk about it much better than I can and why it's big. But so he getting me all this work, and it was cool. And like, I put this picture up because like, I'm not about the male gaze. I'm not about objectifying women. I'm not like, I'm not about like what this picture does to a woman. But this is Little Kim, right? Like, this is not me doing something to Little Kim. Little Kim raps about this. She says, "Look at me in the aquamarine, go and get your Vaseline," right? So that's my picture in a rap song, right? Like, that's kind of cool, you know, to my homeboys in jail, spanking off to my pictures in XXL, right? That's my picture in a rap song, right? So that's kind of exciting to be in How Many Licks, like, to be referenced like that, and a part of culture, you know, like a part of contemporary culture, to be contributing. Like, I'm literally, like, high school dropout from Sullivan County, like, you know what I mean? And here I am, like, I don't know, like, the camera gave me great opportunities and things, and then the bricks started coming and things happening in the music industry, and, you know, at the time, like, when I got a CD and that book, and you, like, tore that plastic and you opened that book up, and like, was it going to be a gatefold? Was it going to be a book? How was that thing going to operate? Like, it was an experience that's gone, you know? That really, you know, it becomes a picture this big in iTunes that doesn't mean anything, you know? It's like, sometimes you don't even know what the picture is, like that Yes picture with the egg being squozen. Like, you might not know what, squozen? Well, yeah. But I don't know, like, the CD was important, you know? Like, it was an important experience of understanding the band. Like, maybe we take for granted now because we see so many pictures, but at the time when I was contributing to these things, it was like, I think that was your experience of, like, people didn't, I don't know, it was different, you know? The imaging for artists was different, right? Just some random things. And I got an agent, and he slowly, consciously wanted me to distance myself from the collage stuff because I wasn't enjoying it. Like, I'd be 2 a.m. in my bathrobe, mumbling to myself in the dark room, like doing this stuff by hand. It was not working. I wanted to be like at a photo shoot with catering and like, you know, and like people around me having fun and shooting pictures, and not like, you know, just in a dark room mumbling to myself at 2 a.m. So, and I started to get these crazy jobs, and you know, the the camera's a weird passport, you know, to morgues, right? Like, it becomes this thing that starts taking me to all these sort of weird places, you know? This is Dr. Bodden, who has the show Autopsy on HBO, and he's like Quincy, you know, and I'm obsessed with forensics, you know. I love true crime and stuff like that. So this guy is a real Merlin of that sort of thing. And this is at the Bellevue morgue. I don't even think you could shoot there anymore. This is my assistant's first day at work. We actually put him in, and I mean, there were bodies in there. And he's like, no problem, I'll do it, you know? I was like, you're crazy, man. You know, and then getting like different kinds of jobs, like oh, we want to do this thing with concepts, you know, magazines like Concepts, they like conceptual pictures, like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sgt. Pepper's, it's like cool. Now we got to find those costumes. And then to find those costumes, like we found the actual costumes that the Beatles wore, you know? So that becomes like a process in itself. It's almost like taking the picture's cool, but when you find the costumes that the Beatles wore and you get them at your photo shoot, that's kind of more interesting than the picture to me. And then that guy, I sent him that thing from Blue Note, right? That gun trumpet shit, that seed, remember I said seeds, right? He started hiring me, he's like, we got this new girl, her name's Norah, maybe you want to shoot her, right? And photograph her, I was like, sure. And then I start doing all this Norah Jones stuff, and that's like shooting fish in a barrel, you know, that's just easy. I'm usually shooting like these ugly heavy metal dudes. And so that was just easy to work with her and be a part of her sort of launch and then, you know, because she's like becomes this premium artist, wins all these Grammys, somehow my name gets elevated with that, you know, she kind of gives me some credibility there. And that was dope. And then like, you know, it's awesome when you have a client like this, but you got to be prepared, like, they're just going to bounce one day, you know, like they might come back, but like I've worked with her in a long, long time. It would be great to do it again, but she's worked with a lot of other great photographers. Different work for, you know, yeah, he's a Blood, he's the gangs, right? The Bloods, right? So conceptual piece for, you know, I remember I was shooting him, I didn't get it at the time, and there were all these dudes wearing red, and I'm like, why is everybody wearing red? But, you know, I always say, I wish I was blacker, but I'm just a cracker, right? Yeah. So, you know, just bricks, just stacking up things, being a part of these people's, you know, their story, and being a part of, you know, how their new records are rolling out, how they're met by the media. You know, the record was called God Forgives, I Don't, you know, so how are you going to work with that title? How do you light a church, man? Like, what? You know, I walked in that church like hours early and I was just like, fuck, right? Like, I had no idea, you know? But I actually lit the church the same way I teach these kids to do a 3-point light setup, like all the time in class for 15 years, you know what I mean? It's really 3 lights, you know? It's no different than hair light, edge light, main light, right? They're just kind of on a different scale with a hazer, right? And a couple yellow gels, right? But you know, I was thinking all day today, like, why portraits? Like, what is it about? Like, I don't want to photograph anything else. A sunset, sure, I'll be like, okay. Like, I have to, right? Like, you know, or, you know, I'll take other pictures, like my dog all day, my wife, of course, but like, I like something about this dance with sort of a difficult, badass person that I kind of dig, you know, like there's, I think it's a dance. I think it's about seeing, like witnessing someone. It's about them seeing me. It's about us kind of like just in this weird sacred space that is only going to exist like an eclipse for like, it's never probably going to happen again. I mean, some people it happens again, but this picture will never be taken again. Like this was when Katrina was ripping through New Orleans and Lil Wayne's family, everyone was being displaced, right? And he's just at work like a professional that day. And I could tell he's gutted, right? Like he's sad, you know? And I'm in Miami, and I'm just trying to find somewhere in pretty glitzy Miami that feels like what's happening So I have this assistant, Raul, down there, and I'm like, and we find this set from Miami Vice in the 80s, right? That's supposed to be Havana. I don't know, I was just so happy that day. But, you know, I see the sadness in his eyes. Like, this is what I forgot sometimes. Like, I was just showing up to do work, and I wanted to do good work, right? Like, I have that Irish work ethic or something. I wanted to do good work, but I didn't really understand the opportunities, maybe like I do now later in life, and where things are. Like, I didn't see them the same way. I didn't really see them as, you know, this might never happen again. Sometimes I got it. This is Future for the record Pluto. We got to go to, I love a great location. This is Huntsville, Alabama, like space camp, right? Where you go to like be in space camp and be weird, right? But when the guy's name's Future, the record's Pluto, you're like, space camp. And they're like, yes. And you're like, great. And that's like your whole creative meeting, right? Like, that's a good creative meeting, right? Or like Leonard Skinner at like some down south hunting camp in the Bayou Swamp, you know? I don't know, that's Skinnerd, man. That's like, it's like the soundtrack to some of my white trash upstate life, you know? Or you know, I'm like Eddie Van Halen. I'm like the 80s, you know? He was probably the coolest guy in the world at the time, you know? I'm like, if over there was a pile of cocaine that went up your nose in your lifetime, how big would that pile be, right? And then that's his reaction, right? And then he's like, oh, not as much as that singer of mine. He had a schnoz, right? And then weird things, like some opportunities I realized, like I'm in this room and I'm shooting jazz at Lincoln Center, and across comes Willie Nelson, like really slow in this giant room. He's walking towards me, and I'm like, that's Willie fucking Nelson. And I just walk right over to him. I'm like, Willie, how you doing? He's like, I'm like, come right over here. I just walk him right on my set. I'm like, I have to photograph you. He's like, he just doesn't know what's happening. You know what I mean? He's like, all right. And again, I'm on set, and like the wizard's not firing, light's not firing, nothing's working. I'm like, fuck. And and then he's like, you got another 2 minutes. Or you got another 10 seconds. He's saying through his teeth in this picture, right? Like I literally shot 3 frames. You know, and then like weird concepts like Khaled's suffering from success. Like that's what he's doing. Like he comes to me, he calls me up sometimes, like he would call me up, Clay, Glazy, what's up? I got it. Suffering from success. And I'm like, what's that look like? Let's talk about that. That's suffering. That's the pain of it all. That's what they will do to you. They will do that. They will put you in that place of suffering, you know, and, you know, you got to shoot that Maybach like, you got to, you know, fall in love with that thing the day you're there, you know. He's suffering, right? I made him drive, because you couldn't get a location like this in New York City for the budget we had. So I made him drive to like way up the Hudson Valley, like 2.5 hours. And he was like, clean it. He was mad. But when he saw the place, he was really happy with it, right? Oh, new record, Kiss the Ring, right? Got to kiss that ring, which the ring is borrowed from Busta Rhymes. Right? So the ring we have to kiss is a borrowed ring from Busta Rhymes, fun fact. There we are kissing it. But fun to like close a street downtown and to shoot a street down there. Fun to put a desk in the middle of the street. You know, when you have some money and resources and you have a good prop stylist and, you know, some backlight and smoke, forget about it. I'll shoot that till I'm dead, you know, backlight and smoke, it's just nothing like it. It's like the Chronic of photography. But, you know, boss, you got to work with boss. Like, how are you going to talk about boss in a different way, right? And you have to work with people's ideas, you know, like, this may be the most important thing I tell you tonight. Like, people come to you with an idea, and usually they've been sitting around, and it's the best idea they have, right? So you don't want to be like, yo, really? That idea? Because they came to me, they're like, it's the band of the year, Velvet Revolver. We want to do this. We have these giant rocks, like those prop rocks they get in LA, the ones that are made of styrofoam that look like rocks. They're like, we want to set up these rocks, and then you're shooting up at them, and they're like on these rocks. And I'm just thinking, like, because they don't understand optics and like how to compose a band. They just think rocks, epic, mountain, band. And I know the picture's going to look like doo-doo garbage, right? So I have to be like, oh, that's awesome. I love rocks, you know? Rocks and rock and roll, oh my God, brilliant, really? But I feel like I might have seen it. I got this other idea. It's kind of like the WWE, you know, where they're backlit and it's wet and, you know, just trying to make them rethink their picture a little bit and not being like, because I've been that guy on the creative call and been like, are you sure about this idea? You know, and then it's done, boom. No, you're gone, job's dead. Nail in the coffin, you're done. Oh, and then the picture turns into other weird pictures. Like I got to shoot Def Leppard in the same circumstances and the guy did some heinous Photoshop that happens to your work sometimes. Just gonna rip through some. I got a ton of. That was a trip. Brian Wilson at the Room where he recorded a lot of the Beach Boys music. So to be a part of, you know, that musical genius. I got to work a lot with Wynton Marsalis. What's up? Oh my God. Yeah. You're really late. If you were my students, I'd really embarrass you, but you guys are like my clients. It's crazy. And they're nasty musicians. Yeah, Jazz at Lincoln Center, I had a good run with them where I was doing all their branding for a while, and then, you know, like, you get an account, you lose an account, it just happens sometimes. It was a real treat to be a part of, like, LeBron's journey when he was still in high school. Right, so he's wearing Adidas, like that'll never happen again, right? You know, just follow him through his journey a little bit, and to take, you know, be a part of his. I guess, you know, how people love this guy, and it's like how they understand and connect with him through these images, and to be a part of that is an honor and a privilege, and it's weird sometimes. So this was some work we did for the Olympics in China where we photographed, that's all Akron, and this is like the courts that LeBron, the projects he grew up in, and all the places he was a part of. And then they gave him to these illustrators that made these huge billboards in China for the Olympics. It's another one on Jason Kidd. I'm all right. Right, this is an exciting campaign. A lot of times I'm working with a film crew, too. When you work for Nike, you're like, they cannibalize their talent, and they'll have like some interweb people there, some photography people there, some commercial, like TV, motion people there, and they'll have all these crews, and then you've got LeBron, and you have some crazy publicist with a timer that's like, you have 9 minutes, right? You have a tremendous amount of, and I love a 9-minute photo shoot. I love the impossibility of the pressure and feeling like I'm just gonna be crushed by it and coming out the other side and being like, yes, right? Like I did, like it happened, right? I love that shit. I love this guy. I was looking for a mentor for a long time. I met this guy, Eddie Adams. He was like, he's famous for, you all know this picture, right? Like this picture changed how we thought about our involvement in Vietnam, won a Pulitzer Prize. Bullet's still actually in his head when it's being taken, right? It's like not passed through. It's crazy. A lot of, but he became. It's a picture of him and his son many years ago. I met him. He took an interest in me. Took an interest in my work. He said nice things. Like he's just very encouraging to me, which I needed at this time in my life. I got a tattoo of him. And I started going to his workshop and teaching there. And I got very influenced by photojournalism and this other way of taking pictures. You know, like I'm kind of a picture maker, right? Like I like lighting. I like a lighting aggressive. I like choosing a location. I like, no, you're not gonna wear that black shirt. You're gonna wear this red shirt. You know, like I like making the soup, right? But photojournalists are a very different skill set, and they're gonna work with like a fly on the wall. They're not gonna move anything in the picture, right? And they're storytellers, and they're like picture takers, right? They just kind of, they're still making pictures, but it's just a different skill set, right? You know the difference, right? Like, you know? So I was like, I want to work on those muscle groups, right? Like I had no game there, like no game there. And so I started photographing this guy named Indian Larry, who was like the Michelangelo of motorcycles in Williamsburg, right? It's like, before, you know, when Williamsburg was, yeah, before now or whatever, right? Like, when, you know, he's like the guy who like made Williamsburg fucking cool, right? And I just started hanging out with him and photographing him. And just watching, right? Like witnessing him differently and not telling him, yo, could you burn that thing again? Could you, like just trying to show up for it and shoot it while it was happening. And you know, here he is just talking to his builders about this bike. It was called the Chain of Mystery. It was an actual chain frame that he welded. And I mean, you know, they're just different pictures, right? Pictures I wouldn't have shot. Like, you know, he was in North Carolina. People gather. They love his bikes. He did crazy stunts, right? He robbed a bank. He got a shotgun in the head, like pellets in the head. You know, he's just like, gee, you know? And like this is a picture of him signing a check and speaking to, you know, like, I don't know, these are pictures I just never would have been interested in or thought about, but I was just kind of witnessing this guy and watching his life, seeing him run a business, right? Thinking about that, thinking about the actual beautiful motorcycles he made. And then in the middle of it, like, he was on the TV shows the builders build off, and he went to North Carolina, and I wasn't gonna go, but I had this like studio manager at the time who found me this cheap flight, and she was like, you're gone. Because she just liked to sit on the internet and me not be around and not work, right? So she really always liked to get me out of the studio. So she got me this cheap flight to go there. And I was there and I was with him and he was doing this, right? And like some stunts for the people, and he fell and had an aneurysm and died. And like, I don't know if this is the last picture of him, but like this is a picture I never really want to take again or have to take again, but I felt like it was my duty for the story. You know, to kind of step in there and take this picture of him going on the gurney, you know, like, I remember getting some cross looks from the people who are around me, right? Like, what are you doing, you know? And I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I have a camera. I've been looking at this guy for a couple months now, and I needed to take that picture, you know? And, you know, so like, something I learned in grad school, I'll talk more about it, but two things matter when you take a picture, right? Two things really matter. Where you stand and when you push the button, right? They really matter, you know? So like this picture, I don't think it's the greatest picture, but like, I'm using a wide lens and I'm about 2.5 feet away, right? There's a difference, right? If I would have shot this picture from with the long lens further away, it would have been different, right? You know, so really getting in there sometimes and getting in the animal space is a different photograph. And I remember feeling like I had to consciously step into that, right? You know what I mean? Like, it was just a picture I'd never taken before. And there's a lot of pictures I think I've never taken before. Like this one I took the night before, you know, and why was I taking this picture, right? I just wanted to show that he was like loved by this Bambi, Queen of the Mermaid parade, right? This is his wife, who's like one of the original burlesque performers, right? He just came out of a race car, you know? I just wanted to show that this guy it was a relationship, that he was loved by his wife, right? And that they were like teenagers together. Again, I don't know, I'm not gonna even talk shit about it. Like, there's just pictures that I learned from Eddie Adams and from the workshop and from thinking a little bit more deeply about who was in front of me and how to photograph a relationship, you know, how to photograph commitment, you know, how to photograph some other stuff. So, you know, contact sheet where there's Eddie Adams and there's Indian Larry, and they're both gone, you know. And I photographed quite a few people who have passed, you know, who I've loved, and people who I'm sure have meant a great deal to some of you in this room, right, you know. But I started to get work like this, which was cool, like day in the life kind of work, you know, like my personal work started to get me some ad work, which was really exciting, you know, where I shot Jeezy and Mickey Avalon and these people, you know, with just the raw light, and people were responding to my personal work, which I think is important, right? This is a fake picture of a concert, right? This is my crew down there. This is only like probably 7 people with their hands up, right? Seriously, right? But I've been to a lot of concerts, and I've always wanted to take certain shots, you know, like I love London Calling, I love that album cover, and I just wanted to take something that just said rock and roll in a way, you know, so I was doing it at this time. And then I'm gonna show this little video. At that workshop, I got real affected by this multimedia sort of thing. And storytelling, and so I started to bring that into my skill set when I was working with artists. And you know, this is years ago, maybe we take it for granted now that we're all capturing motion content and video, but I started to offer it like I could do this electronic press kit in addition to shooting the album cover and all the stuff to make myself a more attractive photographer by offering more deliverables, right? Deliverables, is that what we call them? Do you call them deliverables? And it's that word we use, and you know that word, people in the back row, Solji.
Blood Raw, Mr. Florida. I feel like I'm a different type of dude, man, than any artist, period. I'm just a real dude, man. I live everyday life like I wasn't a rapper, like I wasn't an entertainer, like, because at the end of the day, like, this could be gone tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Because I could be still on the block. I could be still selling drugs, you know, but I was given the opportunity, you know, for a different avenue. Panama City is my hometown. And I was born and raised here, man. Like, it means everything to me. I don't know nobody in the NBA from Panama City. Like, when I walk the streets of Panama City, like, I'm their biggest role model, period. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother was in and out of prison. It was rough. Like, I grew up too fast. I seen things that a child should never see. Shit. When my mama died, I pretty much just, you know, got off the chain. Like, you know, I was uncontrollable. I mean, you know, she died when I was 12 years old, so, you know, you can imagine her going to prison 2-3 times before I turned 12. My grandmother, Annie Lee Fryer, she actually raised me and my sister. She worked at Morrison's cafeteria, you know, making $3 and some an hour. My grandma had 6 of her own children living in the same trailer. When I came out the house, man, it was the crack era was really infested. Like, everybody done it. Everybody sold drugs. If you sold drugs or you was on drugs, you feel me? And I was, like I say, I was 12 years old. I just wanted the fast life. Like, I seen my aunties, you know, my uncles, like, you know, in the streets or whatever. You know, I started stealing it from them. I mean, I ain't even think about the consequences then. Like, consequences weren't even on my mind. I just knew that, you know, I was finna get some money. You know, I was a child, and they gave me 5 years with 10 years probation. You know what I'm saying? Like, they weighed me up to an adult. I mean, I started rapping in prison. I mean, really, and that's when I learned that rap was like something to make me ease my pain. I mean, I was rapping about things I used to do when I was on the street.
I had a dream like Martin, so the pain is what I'm used to. Been through so much hell like a nigga met Lucifer. I know God watching, I can feel his hand. The scripture written, I'm just trying to stick to the plan. I'm a man, my confession is a testimony. I can't figure out why a nigga feel lonely. God, please help me. I'm the realest in it. gospel, I swear these people gotta feel me. Make the word cry, the truth is here in the flesh. Pay attention, I ain't even trying to be the best. Pain brings joy, it feels good to speak. Cause when I hold it in, I swear I feel weak. Can't complain, but I'm really trying to plant a seed. I thought about it, and lately I've been on my knees. I don't know about y'all, but it feel good. Let's bow our heads and send a prayer up for the hood. My life, I'm not ashamed.
How I got the nickname Blood Raw. Actually, Blood Raw is a slang in Florida. It really means the truth. Like, if I'm in a conversation and I'm finna give it to you in the rawest form, I'm gonna be like, man, I'm gonna give it to you Blood Raw, like straight up. Ain't no beat around the bush. You feel me? So for the OGs, man, you know, I used to like let them hear me say my little raps or whatever, and they be like, boy, that shit, that Blood Raw. Somebody would say, well, how could Blood Raw be a role model? He was a drug dealer, or you know, he been in prison. How could he be a role model? Well, you know what? The best role models are role models who lead by example. How could you tell somebody about going to prison or selling drugs if you never done that? Like, you can't. People in this world, the only way that they believe is if they see. Like, you could tell somebody something all day, but nobody's gonna believe you until they see it. So if you know that I've been to jail before, or I've sold drugs before, then you're gonna believe what I'm talking about, because it's more authentic, it's more real. I am a role model, and I take that role serious. Anytime you speak about God, like, people kind of get a little timid. No matter what you're doing. I don't care if you're selling drugs, I don't care if you're robbing, you're stealing, or whatever. Like, if you allow God to come in your life, a lot of that's gonna start to change on its own. Because as long as your faith start growing, then he gonna start knocking all the negativity off. So just know that because you doing wrong doesn't mean that you can't have God in your life. You feel me? So one thing I learned is that if you put him first, then everything's gonna be so much easier. Like, all your dreams can come true, straight up. And I live by that every day. You know, like, I'm still a street dude. Like, I still live my life. You know, I'm a hood nigga. You know what I'm saying? Like, straight up. You know, but at the end of the day, like I told you earlier, it's like, it's some part of your life, like, you gotta bring God into it. And you gotta understand that living life is so important, because you never know what tomorrow brings. My life, the true testimony, man. At the end of the day, you know, doing this music thing is destiny for me.
Yeah, so that was one of the first films I made. I still like that one. I just love his voice. I love the rawness of it. Anyway, through that workshop, I met a lot of great people, became really friendly with these cats at Sports Illustrated, shot a ton of covers for them. And then you kind of become this, I got to follow, you know, his career from you know, yeah, be a part of his career, be a part of his retirement, all that. They kept sending me to prisons for some reason. Like, I don't know, maybe because I got tattoos on my neck, and they're like, oh, send McBride to prison, right? So they're always sending me to prison to shoot stories, and I think that's what photo editors do. They match you with stuff, and I keep getting matched with these kind of harder, like more intense, darker stories, and I'm fine with that, man. That's like, you know, I really would rather be at I don't know, that's weird. Like, given a choice between a convict and like a girl in a bikini on a beach, I want the convict, right? Like, that's just what I want to shoot, you know? And try to make difficult pictures sometimes about a guy in prison who was once going to be a basketball star, you know? So just trying to use whatever you can that's there to shoot. I love working on location, I said that. I love aggressive lighting. This is a story I did in Trenton about most of these people going to die in prison. And I just try to photograph them without that agenda in my head, just like as portraits and as people, you know. But they're mostly killers and pedophiles and terrible, evil men. That was around the time of the Lance Armstrong rubber band, so that was kind of funny. Went for Mom. But I had some weird things, you know, people asked me for some weird things, like in prison, the guards don't stand next to the prisoners. very close, like this, right? So I had to get guard and kind of stage shots, you know, which I'm not really a photojournalist, but if I was, that would be very unethical, right? Very unethical, and they'd probably send me to photo hell to burn forever and never work again, right? But I had to take that picture and, you know, like, because I shot it over a couple stories, and then the photo editor would give me some feedback, and I go back and shoot it some more, and just random things. And like, you know, just to think like, what is sport? Like winning is sport, right? Like what is sport? Sport, right? This is backyard MMA fighting in Florida, 110 degrees, the hottest day of my life. It's about a couple hours later, right? I guess in Florida, like if we want to fight, you and me want to fight. It's legal. If you want to fight me and I want to fight you, there's no laws against it, right? So they get together. This is Dada 5000. He's the head of it all down there. This is one of the fighters. Like, you know, it's such weird. Sometimes you're working for ESPN or something. Like, just get down there, and you don't have a phone number or anything. You're just like, I'm going to shoot some fighting somewhere in Miami, and I'm getting on a plane. It's happening tomorrow. You don't know a thing. You're just kind of walking into a situation not knowing a thing. Like no producer, nobody on the ground. That's what's kind of fun about editorial, is you're just kind of thrown into situations sometimes without any real plan. And you go down and make some bangers. Yeah, that's a gang tattoo, those 3 little dots. I don't know, I'm always looking for stuff like that. I just wanted to get as close as I can with a wide lens, right? That was my plan. I was just like, I want to stick my camera inside this ring, right? And I'm literally in the ring with my camera. My assistant's got like the light on the stick, like the wedding photographer situation, like hoovering, and we're just like invading this fighting match. Just trying to get in there. Like I'm not so good at action, but action's like its own thing. But you get lucky, right? Luck is something you make, right? You know, you shoot a lot. Quantity takes care of quality sometimes, right? You get like a real lucky break, right? Like this picture, there's a few pictures in my life that I'm just like, what? I took that? I was there? I kind of remember it. Yeah, pictures. And then you get like, you Kobe, the Black Mamba, it's another sneaker culture kind of thing. You take this picture and you become a part of this, I don't even know what, like this like, people are crazy about this stuff. You take this picture that people are crazy about, and like social media and stuff elevates it, and then, you know, this, yeah. For the first time in my life, somebody's offering to pay me to put something on my Instagram, which I'm kind of happy about, you know, and it's through pictures like this that make me a kind of an influencer with my 7,000 followers. That's not an influencer, but because I have certain pictures that people, I don't know. I'm kind of excited about that. Not been paid for my Instagram, for my grams. Not been paid for my grams. You know, and I just like this sort of dark intensity to my portraits. I kind of go for, you know, again, the sort of get matched with these badass. The big unit, right? He just like smashed a cameraman in the face the day before this picture was taken, and you know, or it's really exciting to be with these fighters, like in the ring, to watch them train, to hear that when that glove hits that, what is that thing called? Pad, right? To hear the breath, to see the commitment. Like, it makes me like, what the hell is my commitment like to, you know, my brother's strong commitment, you know, this guy in the ring, strong commitment. Mayweather, you know, committed, right? Committed, but to like dance around, like literally, like I say a portrait is a dance, right? The portrait's like, I say it's a celebration of someone's spirit, right? That's to me, like we're celebrating tonight, MPS 10 years, yeah, right? But, like this celebrates Mayweather in this way. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of excited about this. When I was coming here, I was like, my pictures, you know. But I guess it's like when Metallica plays, like Enter the Sandman again, they don't sleep and walk through it, right? They play it like it's the last time they're ever going to play it, right? You know, I feel like that a little bit. You know, I don't think they get sick of their 10 best, or the Pixies get sick of their best songs, right? Like, I don't know. They get exciting to me sometimes when I'm standing here with them. But if I'm all alone, I think it's you. Maybe I'm just feeling your love for them a little bit. Maybe it's just coming through to me, right? Maybe that's it. You know, just some of the crazy places I've been. Like, I'm working with a film crew, right? I'm working with a film crew, and they're just annoyed by a still photographer, right? Like, nobody wants the still photographer to be in there. So I'm usually with them a couple days, and the first day I'm like way back, and I'm bringing over a bottle of water for the DP. You know, I'm like just trying to ingratiate, right? And then by about the third or the fourth day, like, I'm in the cherry picker with the director. It's just me and him and two cameras, right? Like, I'm gonna get my hooks in that crew. I'm gonna be getting the same shot the director's getting, you know, like, but you gotta play it. It's like chess, it's like slow burn, you know, like, you can't just get your ass cracking this shot, like, you know. Yeah, so to watch Paul Pierce, like, bring it to the hole like that from above, like, I don't know, it's kind of rad, you know? Bricks, bangers. I once got sent to Japan, like, they couldn't find a photographer between New York and Japan. And they had to send my ass all the way there and to work for Nike and shoot, which was a treat. I just felt privileged. I wish I stayed longer, you know? I think if you go to a place like that, book yourself a couple days to do other stupid things and to kick it. But such prolific and deep dancers, amazing people. And relationships are key. You know, Rhonda, who taught with us, you know, she says that relationships, referrals, and research are three hugely important things. Relationships, referrals, and research, right? Yeah. And so a relationship with Kid Rock has been awesome, and like, I'm not in alignment with his political beliefs or anything, but like, I appreciate that he's allowed me to, you know, kind of just be the guy who sees him and tells his story and creates his, whatever his image is, you know. It's religion and guns and, you know, it's a hell of a good live show, right? Like, he can play a great live show. And to me, it's like a game changer. If I could be on stage at a show, I want to be on. I don't want to shoot from the pit. I don't want that same shot. I want to be sitting on the drum riser. I want to be right there where the band is. And I shoot the same picture over and over. I try to get it right. Like, I've been shooting this picture. I'm like, I want to get it better, right? Good, better, best. I will not rest till my good is better, my better, best, right? That kind of thing. I want to, and I learned that from sports shooters who sit in the pool, like, shooting a dive until the bubbles don't break weird on their nose and shit. Detroit, you know, he's all about this. He's all about this, you know. Trans Ams. He's about working. He's about songwriting. He's about being in the studio. He's about not wearing a shirt, right? He's about flying private in this jet that used to belong to Bob Seger. You know. Yeah, me and Kid Rock. He was calling me Cleasy Tenenbaum because I was wearing the Tenenbaum. But I was shooting a film, like, behind the scenes video, and I wanted to be like, I wanted to be the thing that was most visible in this film, so I thought I'd dress like a parking cone, you know? Yeah. It's one of his weddings to Pam. It's just funny how him and his son are making the same weird face. Crazy car that used to belong to Hank Williams, that he has all these guns and saddles, and I mean, that's what you do when you have some, you know, crazy rock star money, right? You buy stuff like that and fur coats and yeah, just lots of Kid Rock. I'm not going to show this. I'm just going to cruise through that. I don't know. It's exciting when you have a good crew, and this is in LA. This is 50 Cent's record. Was supposed to be called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So we did this whole St. Valentine's Day thing. So we had great prop styling, great set dressing, the G unit on all the prohibition alcohol, you know. What's that? 5? Okay. Yeah, you know, it's like Chris Cornell, you know, another great one that I, you know, got to look at and got to celebrate, who's passed, and another tragic death. I think 'cause I just like these black and white pictures. They're probably my favorite images, these just sort of little black and white series here. I like Robert Franks's, you know, he shoots in black and white because it's the color of hope and despair, right? And I feel that in black and white. Neil Young, meeting Neil Young and I'm talking to him and his publicist who says, you know, you only got 10 minutes, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I'm gonna probably talk to Neil Young for 5 minutes because this is never gonna fucking happen again, so leave me alone, you know? And I'll shoot him for 5 minutes, but could you black off, right? Yeah, I just wanted to thank him for being like this part of the soundtrack, like this carpet that my life has sat on for so many years. Like, you hear Heart of Gold or something. I wouldn't take this picture anymore, love it, but like with guns being what guns are now, this is taken in '99, you know, these are the Chrome Desert Eagles from Belly, you know. I don't know, I just wasn't thinking that, you know, our pictures start a conversation with the world. What's that conversation gonna be, you know? And there's a responsibility there. Just for the retouching nerds here, right? No retouching, retouching. No retouching, retouching, right? No wet down in the street, wet down in the street. No production value, production value. Ebony and ivory. All right, so like Metallica, I mean, if you opened up my heart and looked inside, there would be, you know, like Metallica saved my life as a misunderstood teenager. Those people were like healing me, right? So I gotten to work with them. I've had the pleasure of working with them several times, right? And every time I do it, I just get so excited that I'm shooting Metallica, that I'm like a teenage girl or something. I'm just like, yay, right? And I'm at Bonnaroo with them, and it's a huge festival with probably 60, 80,000 people, and yeah, there I am having time of my life. And I'm stoked, right? And, you know, this is like my Rolling Stones or my Beatles. They're important to me. And I took this picture a long time ago, just at the end of the shoot of James with his kids, and, you know, this is probably 17 years ago or something. And I sent it to him, and we became friends, you know? So I get embedded with them, and I'm at the show, and I have great access for a couple days. I'm with Metallica, and I'm fired up. And they do a small show for like their diehard fans, like 50 diehard fans. They play for 2 hours at a basement bar, which is crazy, and I'm just there with my jaw down to the ground. And I'm just having the time of my life. And I'm like on stage and I'm sitting on the drum riser and I'm looking at the set list. And there's all this concussion and explosions going off. And I'm like, oh, this is the last song. This is it. They're like ramping up. They're closing Saturday night. Bonnaroo, 80,000. It's crazy. I'm on stage with these cats and I'm taking pictures, right? And then I know that they're gonna bow, right? They're gonna do this thing. And I'm behind them, and I got my camera set, and I'm thinking I'm gonna take this shot that's gonna be like a Jim Marshall shot, that's gonna be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame picture. And this picture sucks, right? Like this picture is not the picture I wanted to take. So, like I'm here, and I'm like chimping. I'm like looking at the computer, and I'm like, damn it. Right? And I'm like, and now I'm like red. I'm standing there and I'm like red. I'm trying to get the frame right. The light's too far away. The crowd's too far away. Nothing is breaking right in this picture, right? And then I just stopped and I like put the camera down and I like looked at my favorite band and then I looked at 80,000 people and I looked at my little, you know, I was standing there And I was like, how did this happen? How the hell did this happen, right? And I thought, well, yeah, it happened. I got here the same way they did. I did something I love for like 25 years with discipline and perseverance. And I followed my dream, right? You know? And it wasn't about the picture anymore, right? It was about just where I was. And I've been meditating at the time, and I could do it some more right now, because sometimes I forget. I get very attached in life to the results, and I forget just where I am, you know? Like right now, I'm talking for a college that I went to, you know? I'm in New York City, right? That's just rad, right? And that's probably like one of my greatest moments that I'm glad I get to share with you, and I hope that you could take something from that, like there's a time, she has it on her door, there's a time to criticize and there's a time to create, and they're not necessarily at the same time, Sometimes when you these digital cameras, awesome things, but like forget you can see the back of the camera and just like shoot and let go of the results, and just be where you are and connect with who you are. So I teach these kids who have their heads so far up the camera's anus that they're so into making a picture that's right that they forget that it's like you make decisions with two things in life, your head and your heart, right? You forget one, you're effed, right? You have to take both things into consideration. So I'm off my soapbox. Thanks for having me. Yep.
Hi, Clay. I'm Brooklyn. I just graduated in 2017, so it's an honor to be in the same program with you. So coming from where you came from to your journey now, how do you feel photography has saved you and helped you deal with the circumstances around us today?
Yeah, I think it could with even where I am right now. Like I'm in Rochester and I'm having a hard time, and I think I could be making sense of some stuff I'm going through up there with the camera, and I'm not. And I've been encouraged by my wife to do some stuff that I'm sleeping on. I haven't had much of a creative practice lately, and I think that just happens sometimes. Like I'm like Jekyll and Hyde when it comes to art. There's part of me that does nothing, and then there's the part of me that's pretty manic and stupid. But not everyone believes it, but like I just think that there's something that a camera gives me that food doesn't, that relationships don't, that reading doesn't. There's something in the world when my world is expanding, and I feel like I'm seeing something I've never seen before. I feel alive, and maybe not even something I've never seen before, but yeah, I feel alive when I'm creating, and that I'm contributing. I think one thing I'm trying to do now that I think is really important is like the game has changed. When I came into the business, very different business, right? So I'm trying to make these kids ninjas that come out of the schools I'm teaching it. I'm hard on them, but I'm giving them 110%. I'm giving them right out of my playbook. Oh, you want to know how I lit that? Here it is. Go kill it, right? And I'm proud of their success, So, right, I think it's a weird time, and there's a lot of noise, and we need more voices, So to help people cultivate voices is one thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
So Clay,
Yeah.
who or what do you still want to shoot that you've never shot yet?
Wow. Yeah, I don't really even have any of that stuff on my tip of my tongue, really. Like, I have to say that, like, for a while, entertainment business, it was like shooting dope, and I just felt like I was getting off on the next famed person. And then, like dope stops working, you know what I mean? And you're just maintaining, like, it stopped meaning something to me the same way. I changed, right? And I think I got less starstruck and less enamored, and I think of David Bowie because he's dead, right? you know, you're gonna like, I feel very. I don't even know who that is. You know, I can't answer that question. I probably can in 5 minutes, right? Like on the way out, I'll be like, oh yeah, and this person and that person and, yeah. I really like now when I work with young bands who feel privileged to be working with a seasoned guy like me, and there's a different shift, like, I don't know, they're like, you're the artist here, man, do your thing, and not like, I have to kowtow to somebody and like, you know, feel privileged to be in the room with them. I don't know, like, yeah. This guy Kendrick's pretty cool. You want to make that happen for me? Yeah? You can make that happen. What's happening?
Hey, how are you?
Yep.
I don't know if you remember me, but about 5 years ago, I was lucky enough to give my own lecture at SVA. I had come through a very serious illness.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And I had shown a large body of work, literally. I wanted to thank you, actually. You were sitting in the front row, and I don't know if you remember this, but you sort of, in now knowing you a little better after this, certainly, you had said to me, so what does all this mean? You know, where are you going with all this? I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I remember from it. And you challenged me, and I had to say, and it was the truth from the heart, of course, I said, all of this has given me a purpose. And I had been photographing my whole life and continue to, but when I speak to people, and I've given a lot of lectures since then, so thank you, Katrine and Tom, too. It's set me on a whole course over these years, but you telling me that and me answering in that way has really stuck with me over the years, and I tell other people that as well. So thank you, and you've been a big inspiration to me, and you didn't even know it, so thank you.
I think that's the most powerful thing is that I feel in, you know, meeting Neil Young. It's like these people have affected me. You know, we affect each other, you know, with what we do, whether that's with a camera or in a classroom or, you know, that people have a tremendous effect on each other, and we can't like sleep on that. It's powerful.
I had a minor question, just when you were talking about the Eddie Adams workshop and that they brought you in to teach, and you talked about everything you learned, which I think makes you a great instructor.
Yeah.
But what were you brought to teach at Eddie Adams?
Well, you know, I was a team leader, right? Which, you know, I'm an ass kicker, you know? I'm like a motivator. I'm like, you know, your best is not good enough. I want more, right? You know, like a bad football coach that's just gonna like just berate you into the ground. Not really, because it comes from a loving place, and I think I have mercy and severity, two edges. That's what the sword has. So, yeah, I was brought in to be a team leader. You work in these groups of 10. It's free. You guys should apply. 100 people get to go, 50 students, 50 professionals. It's Diesel. It's in its 30th year now. It's a very powerful thing. So I was a team leader, so I just got these kids together, and you know, we did good stories like, you know, we did one on youth, and you know, all different. We did spirituality one year, where they all go out and attack the subject matter of spirituality. You should check it out. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clay. Wonderful lecture.